So we are going to see like how to install AEM and how to work on the different interfaces. How do I? The next chapter is I need to learn. We as a developers, right? We know all the interfaces, the consoles, the different UIs that are available. We have something called as a modes. We as a developers, we should know each and every word of these, how to make use of them, how to work on these particular screens, etc. There are so many options, so many things are there built within the tool. So basically, when I started, I was explaining like AEM is nothing but your web server. Okay, I'm hitting a page, I'm hitting a web page. Okay, I'm just resolved by a web server, and it has to be rendered back on the browser. Okay, so AEM is nothing but a with the web server. Plus, on top of the web server, it has some tools for content editing, basically. So it has some tools for the CMS purpose. It has tools for editing the pages, adding pages, changing interfaces. So what are the different tools that are there, and how do I use them? That's all I'm looking for within the AEM layer. What are the tools? These are the list of start points. These are the touch points within the tool, and how do I use them? That's what I need to know from the AEM. First step. I need to and simply double click on it. If you just double click on this AEM software, the AEM executable jar, it pops up comfortably. You need to have JDK installed, JDK 1.8 installed. Okay, so in case if you are facing any hiccups, most likely it's due to class path conflict. Okay, your class path should have the entry of your JDK. JDK's entry should be available in the class path. So if that's all the requirement is needed for a AEM installation, not a lot of gimmick or something. Just we need a JDK installed, and if I just double click on, I will be able to. I request you guys to start your AEM, keep your AEM open. Okay, so because we are going to see we are going to look into all the other screens, etc. Okay, so it will be helpful for you. We need to have the software. Like make sure that AEM is started in your local. Okay. This is of starting AEM. Okay, so when I just click on it, when you click on the executable jar, to pop up and little window, and it's going to start my AEM. Okay, there is a nomenclature that this follows. Okay, it has to be AEM hyphen. It is hyphenated. Okay, you need to have an optional what's the software name. So AEM 6.3, AEM 6.1 something hyphen. This is known as a run mode. Okay, so we are learning some new terms. Keep track of them. We are learning a new word called run mode. Okay, so this will tell whether is it an author or a publish instance, and then we by the port on which the application is running for me. So this is a AEM nomenclature. If at all I'm starting my AEM in if I'm double clicking on my executable jar file, and if I'm starting it, okay, this is the nomenclature that is followed. Okay, this is the naming standard that is followed. It has to be file name hyphen your run mode hyphen your port number. To play around, you can optionally change the port number. You change the port number to 4506 something. Okay, your application, you will find that localhost /4506 something like that. The port number that is dictated on your file name, that will be the port number with which your AEM is starting. Okay, So that's how I will know that AIM is starting. For any reason, if you try to give a conflicting port number, for example, you have already started your AIM in 4502, and if you want to start your second AIM instance in same 4502, it will conflict and it will start it against 8080. That's a default behavior. If at all your port is available, if your port is available, it will start the AIM in the port. If your port is not available, it will start by default in 8080. This is the anybody facing hiccups, do raise your hands. I want to hear and I want to solve the hiccups right away. Okay, so that yeah, without starting sound, we cannot do anything. Okay, project setup. These are the different layers that we will be having in a typical AIM project setup. I'm starting my AIM software, right? Okay. I have something called as an author instance. We are trying to explain the word run mode. What does the run mode signify? Okay. We have something called as an author instance. We have something called as an publish instance. Okay. And then we also have something called as a dispatcher. And then we have a load balancer. Okay. So we have a load balancer. Now you guys tell me, what is the understanding that you have? What is author? What is publish? Why do we need to have so many layers? What do I understand by these different terms? Yeah, open to you. Like, do you want to try it out? So what do I mean by, what is the difference between an author and a publisher? Open question. Why author and a publish? This is the question. Anybody, you guys are using your author and publish instances? Yes, no? Why did industry wanted to go for? So once again, I'll point out that this author, publisher, these run modes, this is an industry concept. There's nothing proprietary to AIM. It's nothing proprietary to Adobe. Okay, Adobe does not define these. It's an industry practice. But question is why?
Basically, author is for creating pages and editing the content and adding the content. Whereas comes to publish instance, it's only for end user purpose. We just see the pages and write the comments. These are all, so you can do it on the publish instance. Basically.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, I'll accept that answer. Good. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Yes, author is used only for editing the pages, creating the pages. All your, I'll call them as a CRUD operations, right? Okay. So I hope you know what's a CRUD, right?
Yeah.
I'll call them as a CRUD operations, and publish is only for. But why? Why shouldn't I do CRUD operations on a publish? What harm is going to happen if I do CRUD operations on the publish directly?
We are giving only access to see the pages. End users, we are not able. We couldn't give access. We cannot give access to create the pages and edit the pages and all the stuff for end user. They don't need to give these things for end user. They just only need to see the pages and they want to perform.
Okay. Fine. So we are slowly building a story here. So the question asked is, why author, why publisher? So that's the question asked. Author is used for the CRUD operations, okay, and publisher is used for viewing the pages alone. Okay, it's only for a view purpose, and author is used for the CRUD operations. So this answers the what part of it. What is an author? What is an publish? The answer has been provided. Author instance. The author run mode is used for the CRUD operations, and the publish is used for the view purpose only. Okay. Now question is, we have comfortably answered what part of it. So I hope you get the answer to what is author, what is publish. we are trying to understand why author and why publish. One of the reason pointed out to us, like end users need not be provided the CRUD permissions. Okay, they need not do CRUD operations on the pages, right? But end users need not create the pages. End users need not delete the pages. They just need to view the pages. So why do we need to expose the creation, updation of the pages to the end users? So that's a question, right?
Yes.
Now, let me put it in a different way. Let me classify, like you guys know ACL permissions, right? Like ACL as we use it in your Active Directory, right? As we do it in your AD or your LDAP tools, any of the LDAP tool, you can either go for AD or you can go for like Apache LDAP also. Okay, it depends on your organization, or IBM LDAP, Tivoli. You can do any LDAP software. You open a ACL, you give ACL permissions for an end users. Okay, usually end users fall under a group called anonymous. This is the usual group that end users always fall into. Okay, and you create a group called authors. The authors will be given all the CRUD permissions, and the anonymous group, when I come in as an end user, I will only be provided with the CRUD. I'll be only provided with the view operation. Now, will this solve the trouble? If I come as an end user, I will only be able to view the pages because I have been given permissions. I have been restricted to. Yeah.
No, we don't want to show the development work to the. You see, we want to do some development activity which we want to release only a particular time after. Then you can use it. You cannot differentiate it if you do both in the same environment. So if you keep it separate, then at least you can only release the items what we supposed to release.
Good. Okay. Good point. Okay. So just to recap, the previous point that was pointed out, like end users only should view and authors only should edit it. I can control it with ACL, so nothing harm in doing it. I can still make use of one publisher alone. So second defense point that I'm hearing is, if I have a half-baked page, like if I have uncooked page, for example, okay, just if incomplete pages, if I'm having, I need not show the in-progress pages onto the publish instance. I need not show the pages which are still being. So that's what you are meaning, right, Pattu? So you are still working on the pages. Exactly. So you do not want to those pages. Why do we need to show them? Let's assume this. We will have a sort of a workflow in between. We will have a process so that the in-progress pages will still be controlled with ACL. I can write ACL permissions. Like there are techniques to do it where I can make it powerful that if a page is still in progress, it will not be view for the end users. End users are always only one category. End users are always anonymous. It will not be a viewable for them. And to finish my page, I have to go through a little workflow process. Probably set few parameters, set few properties, and only then my ACL permission will flip that page to be available for the anonymous users. I can do it within one single instance alone. But why? Why do I want to go for the author? So does that answer your question? Like, does that act as a defense for you? It's technically it is possible. Like, see, the problem going for multiple instances is it becomes expensive for me. I have to invest on hardware to install my author instance. This is going to be like I have to install separate hardware for this, right? Or if I'm going for a cloud-based platform, if I'm hosting all my websites onto like a AWS cloud or something, I have to purchase cloud for this person. I have to purchase cloud for this person. It's a bad for me because I'm making my tasks more and more expensive, right? So this doesn't look like a good model. Why did they go for it? What else? Any other thought?
You can do the load balancing, all those things in the publish instance.
Okay, rollback, good point. Yes, agreed. But still, can I do a rollback by controlling the properties alone on the page, wherein like if those properties gets reverted back, or think of this. You know how EJB works, right? Or if at all you guys have worked on EJB. EJB has a very powerful. Actually, EJB was one of the first technologies to bring back this concept called rollbacking, where they manage the transaction. Okay. If some mishap happens, if I have like a 2-step or a 3-step process within the same EJB transaction, and if one of the process gets stopped, EJB, the container will take care of rolling back the completed transactions also. That is the transaction capability of EJB. EJB knows to roll back the previous steps that had happened successfully, so that like it will roll back to the initial state. How does EJB do when it has only one container? EJB does everything within the same container. It has only one container. It has a very powerful rollback mechanism. Okay, and this was created very long back before the CMS guys. CMS guys could have simply copied how it has been implemented in the EJB layer. Okay, rollbacking is a reason. Yes, rollback. I should have a very powerful rollback, but I need not go for 2 instances. I need not go for 2 servers to do a rollback. EJB is able to do this rollback within a single server only. Why not for CMS world? Why did you wanted to create a author and a publish? Correct, right? I'm just trying to play a devil's advocate. So all your points are valid points. You are not
testing data. You don't want to mess up the testing data with the real data.
Yeah, sorry.
You don't want to mess up the testing data with the real data. The real author content, you don't want to use it as the testing content. Again, you can do it in multiple places, like, you put the testing page and then convert that into.
Trust me, Parthu, do you think there are no test pages in your production site? You need to rethink about it. Okay,
but it's all cost of it, right? It's the effort and the cost. It's all effort and the cost compared to the instance cost, right?
See, it all comes with the tool, right? So basically, if the tool had that appropriate capability, so if I just need to, if the tool had only, if the tool has been designed to do with all the stuffs with only one instances, okay, it's cost effective for me, and people would have started going for the tool. It's only the tool capability. It's nothing to do with see, I'm only purchasing the tool, right? So why should I purchase a tool which requests for 2 servers versus do I need to invest on a tool which supports only 1 server? Okay, so for example, if you are buying a personal computer and the shop tells that you have to purchase 2 CPUs, your Best Buy, your shop owner says that you have to purchase 2 CPUs. Will you buy that computer that asks to buy you 2 CPUs, or will you buy a computer that asks you to buy only 1 CPU? It's the tool, the product owner who sells, right? He should make it fancy to sell it to purchase only 1 CPU, like 1 server, and people will like it and they will buy for it. Why did the product owner, he decided to sell it as a 2 separate servers, and still it is working out in the industry? Why did they want to do it? So yeah. Why is the question?
Let me put it in this way. Actually, apart from these things, we need to do load balancing, caching, right?
It's all internal. Okay, I have not reached to those layers yet. And trust me, all these concepts that you're talking about, load balancing, caching, never happens at the AEM layer. Okay, it never happens at these layers. They happen outside the AEM only. There's no load balancing capability in AEM. Okay, so remember this also. Even in interviews, if they ask what is the load balancing capability of AEM, 0. AEM doesn't support load balancing. Only the dispatcher, the load balancers, actually the dispatcher module that you install on top of your Apache, that is the guy who supports load balancing. And caching, to an extent, AEM does caching. That's an EH cache. We have a folder called var folder. Okay, so we have something called as a /var folder, and all the pages, everything gets cached into AEM under the var folder. Yeah, it does support caching to an extent, but no, that's not the reason. Like the extent of caching done by author is exactly the same that publisher also does for me within AEM layer, right? So the AEM creates a folder called /var. If you go to your CRX are treated in author, it's exactly the same it is treated in the publish also. So caching is not different in author versus publish. So why did Adobe wanted to create two different servers? Why do they want to mandate people to take up two different servers? Fine. When I launch the jar, it's asking for username and password. Okay, username and password. Prithvi. Username and password is admin. Okay, it is similar to your in Oracle. We have a default username password of what's the default username and password in Oracle, or what's the default username and password in Oracle? What was the username and password for Oracle? Like long back, like I was doing this when I was studying college. The default username and password. Do you guys remember?
Scott Tiger.
Yeah, so something similar to your Scott Tiger. Okay, admin is the username and password for AEM always. Okay, so coming back, why is the question, right? Okay, I used to so any other idea, like any other thoughts, or I'll disclose it. Okay, any other thoughts? 3, 2, 1. All right. So usually when I take training, I used to draw an analogy, okay, of comparing this tool, AEM tool, with a car manufacturer. Okay, so I am a car manufacturer. I am manufacturing, for example, I'm the Ford owner. I'm manufacturing a car for me. Now, when I manufacture a car, I design my car in such a way. I design the car so that I will open the tools needed for operating the car, okay, for two types of users basically. Okay, when I design the tools for operating the car, okay, I design it for operating it for, I target for two types of users. That means, okay, starting a car, for example, okay, can be done by two types of users. Okay, one type of user is your driver who puts a key and he starts the car. Okay, this is one way. And the other way is, what's another way of starting a car? Is there any other way of starting a car? Like a different type of user. Who are the users of a car who make use of the different tools that are there in the car? One is a driver who is actually consuming the car, and there's another type of user who is, any other guess? How do I start a car? Like a key way of starting a car versus, is there any other techniques to start a car? Come on guys, like any other techniques, any other tricks to start a car? Jump start a car. Without a key, can I start a car?
No.
Yes, no? No? Is there a mechanic way of starting a car?
Yes.
He cuts a couple of wires. I don't know like how he starts the car. I have no idea how he starts the car. But he cuts a couple of wires and he tries to trip a couple of wires and magically he starts a car even without a key. Agreed? Is there a mechanic way of starting a car? So, in order to start the car, like there are two techniques of starting a car. Either I can start the car as a driver, the way how everyone knows to start the car, or there is a mechanic way of starting the car also. There are two types of users whom I need to target when I manufacture a car. One type of user is the drivers, the actual consumers, the tools, the techniques that are exposed to these guys, okay, the tools, the way of operating the car exposed to these guys is very it's a very high level, okay, or it's abstracted, okay. Not lot of details is exposed to these guys, versus when I create tools for the second set of guys, the mechanics, okay, this is more at a low level, okay. When I manufacture a car, I have to make sure that these type of users can also consume the car, and these types of users can also consume the car, right? The tools that are exposed for these guys are completely different from the tools that are exposed to these guys. Exact same analogy, the tools that are exposed to content authors are completely different from the tools that are exposed to the end users, okay. Both of these people require tools to view the pages. If a page on my browser who is resolving my HTTP request, someone who is going to take care of my ACL permissions, so there are multiple tools, code, software that are acting upon, but the tools that are exposed to these guys are completely different from the tools that are exposed to these guys. The end users will be presented only with the tools, okay? They'll be presented only with the nicer version of what you view on the website alone, whereas these people, the authors are the mechanic, okay. They will get access to more tools. They will know how to operate the engine, or like open and do stuff that a regular customer will not be able to do. The difference between an author and a publisher is the number of tools that are exposed are completely different from the tools that are exposed for the end users, all right. If I am an author, if I start a AEM in an author instance, I have more tools exposed, versus if I start in a published instance, I end up, okay, it's asking for a license key. Like, first it will ask for the license key and only then it will ask for the username and password. This is a bit ulta. I'm not sure. I'll share the license key right away shortly. So that's the difference between an author and an publish. So why author, why publish? All these are valid answers. Okay, so all these reasons that you are giving are valid. Yes, this is the reason why they wanted to go for author and publish. But the tools that are exposed, okay, very simple, right? You have a tool called SiteAdmin. This SiteAdmin is not available in your publish instance. You have a tool called DAMAdmin. DAMAdmin is not there in your publish instance. You have something called a workflow admin. That's no workflow console in your so that's it, like very simple. The tools author, I need to differentiate the tools that are exposed for author versus publish. That's why they wanted to go for author under publish instance. And why they wanted to do it is still once again, right, like coming back to the same argument. Can't I expose all these tools in the directly into the publish instance itself, and can't I do it like, because I'm getting a car, right? Like a car is only one product. We never purchase two cars for one for a mechanic purpose and one for a consumer purpose, right? Like car is coming as a silo product for me. Why did they wanted to separate this in the AEM world alone? Can't I do the same in this? The reason why they wanted to heavily invest on a separate tool for publish instance alone is the time taken to render a website. Okay, it's very time critical. How do I say it? Like it will become a very expensive operation when I hit a web page and when it passes through all the heavier tools. Okay, the moment when I say a tool that's exposed, right, you can analogize like this is going to load up to like say 63 JS files and CSS files on your browser before the actual page is rendered for you. In case of this one, it's only your 12 to 13 application JS and CSS that you are loading. All the authoring JS and CSS is going to be loaded in your author instance. When they designed the software, they wanted to make sure that they want to serve only a limited version of the viewable capability of the website to the end users, and this has to be very powerful also. They wanted to make it more and more powerful so that like website will become faster in nature. And so that's how technology evolved. They ended up creating in two different tools rather than making use of one single tool alone. So that's for the tools that are exposed, the software that are exposed for author and publish are completely different. Okay, it loads. So the AEM load a lesser number of software versus. That's the main difference between an author and a publish instance. All right. So, what's the purpose of a dispatcher? So, yeah, hello. Parthu, Narayan, guys, are you there?
Yeah. Did you ask any question?
Yeah. So, question is like, what is dispatcher?
So, dispatcher is like you said already, right? The load balancing and everything, those things. Basically, to improve the performance of the instance, you can set up a caching, all those things. But actually, it's like an a web server actually. So just like a web server, which sits on the top of the all speed, performance, caching, all the different settings, like domain name allocation, all these things you can go through with dispatcher.
Good. Okay. Domain.
Yeah. I already use, so that's why I want to be silent so other people get a chance.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you have given everything that we need to talk about dispatcher actually. So this is the comprehensive list of everything that I should know about a dispatcher. Yeah, pretty much everything is covered. So I'll repeat it. What dispatcher is? So the day one, always I try to analyze this. Okay, always remember that AEM is nothing but a web server. Okay, what is a web server? When I get a web request, when I get a from the request that is coming in, okay, and do some processing on the request and return the request back to the browser. So always any system that you take, it can be broken down into three subsystems. Okay, there's a processing unit and then there's an output unit. Okay, so can I give us admin? Sorry, 1 second. There's a question asked. Name I can give us experience, right? Yeah. Okay, so all right. Any system that you take, it always comprises of an input unit, a processing unit, and then an output unit. Okay. In case of your computer, your keyboard is your input, your CPU and your monitor is your output, right? Similarly, I am placing a request from the browser. Your input is going to be the browser. Your processing unit is your web server, and your output is going to be your web page that is rendered on your browser. Any system you take, and even when you do coding also, try to break down your coding, like even if you are writing a module or a small function, you are writing a small method. Try to break down everything into these three parameters. Like try to break down into one valid input, one processing unit, and one valid output. Okay, and it will be a consistent system. Like it's a proven technology. It's a proven wording. All right. So my AEM access the web server. Any request that comes in, AEM is only going to process that web server, process that request, and render back the HTML back onto the browser. I need the other layers for as he pointed out, like I'll refer down only, for performance purpose, for speed purpose, okay, and to an extent, I can define all my subdomains, all my domain purposes I can break down into. For caching purpose, I go for the other layers, okay. what is dispatcher is, even before the dispatcher, I need something called as an HTTP server. Okay, so I have my web server layer. On top of the web server, the AEM uses a web server called Jetty server. Jetty is the web server that AEM uses. On top of the Jetty web server, we install an HTTP server, which is going to be an Apache or an IIS, Nginx. There are so many, like what else are we using? There are so many HTTP servers used in market. These are not web servers. So thumb rule, remember something, your dispatcher is not a web server, it is only a HTTP server. Okay, there is a difference between a web server and a HTTP server, where and you know, to take a stab, like how do I differentiate a HTTP server from a web server? How do I understand what's the difference between a HTTP server and a web server? Any guess? So always remember this, like dispatcher, okay, they call this as a web server, maybe a misnomer, but this Apache having the web content web pages, it more acts only as a HTTP server, whereas my Jetty, where my AEM runs, that acts as more as a web server. Not a lot of difference, like it's your line is very thin, both the HTTP server and web server, the line is very thin. Not a huge difference. HTTP server does HTTP routing. That's all purpose of it. When it gets a HTTP request, it routes that request to an appropriate HTTP or web server that is actually renders the HTTP request, which processes the HTTP request. And the web server will actually do web processing. So you have a JSP file, or you have you are backing it with a web.xml, or you are having a WAR file in Java. It's a J2E world. It's known as a web archive file or WAR file. Okay. So in order to process all these, my HTTP server do not know to process these guys. Okay. When I get a JSP request, okay, at runtime, what happens is the JSPs will be compiled into a servlet file. Okay, they will get compiled. This happens during the runtime. When I place a request on the browser, and if my request is being served by a JSP file, okay, the first step is the web server will convert that JSP into a servlet file, and then it will process the servlet. Servlet is actually a .java file. The web server will process that servlet file, and that output is only will be rendered on the web, onto my page. In case of HTTP server do not know to digest. It does not know to cook the JSP file into a servlet file and all. It needs to be a .html. It has to be a HTTP file. It has to be like a HTML or a HTL file. It has to be a broken down file. It has to be pretty much static in nature. Okay, except for there is a little bit of a exception to it. Like it supports something called as an SSI, server side includes. But majority of the cases, it has to be static in nature, and it knows to return that response. When I place a a.html, if it's a static file, no processing, my HTTP server will return that response back to me. Okay, very simple. I throw a.html, a.html will be bounced back to me. But if the a.html is actually served from a.jsp, plus it loads some other backend, it makes a web service call. It makes a Ajax call. Not Ajax. It makes a web service, REST web services call, or like a SOAP web services call. It needs to be processed. My HTTP server is not the guy. It needs to be a web server for me. Okay. It reaches the web server processes the request, and then it returns back the response. So that's why I go for a dispatch layer. Why dispatch? I install these purposes for caching purpose and performance speed purpose.